What's going on, everyone? So all offseason, it looked like the Miami Heat were going to get Damian Lillard, right? All of the talk from the moment Damian Lillard requested the trade was that he was headed to Miami. That was his preferred destination. That's where he wanted to go. Miami was even patient and waited and believed that Damian Lillard, this would be the year in which he would be traded. And they were right about that. Absolutely. And, Miami, in a lot of ways, kind of got a little cocky, right? Just kind of, there was the report, hey, if you think you can find a better deal, if you think you can find a better trade, good luck to you, right? Because we don't believe you can. Guess what? The Milwaukee Bucks came in and said, well, we'll trade for Damian Lillard. And Miami ended up missing out on Dame, even after all of the campaigning Dame did, and especially his agent, right? Now, obviously, the agent denied what was reported and what was said about, the agent going around saying like, hey, if you trade for Damian Lillard, he's not going to play, he's not going to show up for camp, all that stuff. And the Milwaukee Bucks, at least, called their bluff, and Damian Lillard has played thus far. And that was a big blow to Miami, right? Now, look, Miami's not, drowning or anything. They're currently 9-5 and the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they've played good basketball. They took a couple losses, but they were just coming off of a 5 or 6 game win streak. So Miami is in good shape, but they really put their eggs into the Damian Lillard basket and still need a guy like Damian Lillard. And Zach Lavine, he is now officially available, right? Now, obviously, Chicago doesn't have to trade for him or have to trade him. And Miami's going to have to kind of pony up because it is kind of another Dame situation to where, hey, he's under contract. He's on year 2 of a 5-year deal, right? So we're going to sell him to the highest bidder. And so Miami's not going to be in a position to kind of play hardball and be like, well, we will wait and see if you can find somebody better. Now, I do think Zach Lavine is going to be a lot harder to trade than Damian Lillard because Zach Lavine is not Damian Lillard. Zach Lavine is a very good player. Don't get me wrong. He's not a $40 million a year good player. He is like a fringe borderline all-star guy who can be very inconsistent at times and has an injury history. And that makes it very difficult because he's not a top 10 player. He's not a top 20 player. I don't even think he's a top 25 player, maybe top 30, right? And he's making superstar level money. So a lot of teams are completely ruled out from the jump because of just the salary in which they have to meet in order to get Zach Lavine. Luckily for Miami, Zach Lavine has mentioned that Miami is one of the destinations he would like to go. Luckily for Miami, they have contracts like a Kyle Lowry, a Duncan Robinson, things like that, in which they could package together to go and trade for Zach Lavine, and it really wouldn't hurt their roster much, if at all. And they have picks, and they have some young players and some young talent that they could, kind of entice the Chicago Bulls to take on. Now, does Chicago want to trade him east? Right? Because that was like one of the things with Damian Lillard. Right? Like Portland, they didn't really want to trade him into the conference. They wanted him to go elsewhere. That's why another reason why Miami thought Dame was coming to Miami was because it was like, hey, you don't want to keep him in the West, and there's very few teams that are going to trade for him, and ultimately they sent him east to the Milwaukee Bucks, who are currently 10-4, right? So I don't think Chicago will care about Lavine as much as like Dame, because like Dame was a completely different situation also, right? Dame, it was their franchise guy for the last 11 years or whatever it's been, and Zach Lavine has hopped around various places. Zach Lavine again isn't this like superstar type player that a Damian Lillard was, so I don't think it's as impactful. I don't think it's like as big of a deal. Right, as like if Portland had to see Dame 4 times a year, that would be a little different. So I do think Miami can definitely get in the conversation, but is it worth it for Miami is the question. Because again, they would be taking on a $40 million a year Zach Lavine. Now, I do think Zach Lavine would make Miami a lot better. I have questions about Zach Lavine making some other teams that are on that list better. Like Philly, I don't know how much better Zach makes them because I think him and Tyrese Maxey kind of become counterproductive at times. Same thing with like Sacramento. I think Sacramento even more than the Sixers, right? Because De'Aaron Fox is kind of a lot of the same, right? Like hyper athlete, can apply rim pressure, 3-level scorer type guy, but De'Aaron Fox is the clutch go-to guy down the stretch. Now, I do think that there's the potential that Zach Lavine does make them better. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for teams like that. I don't. I think the two best destinations for Zach Lavine and for the teams in which that would trade for Zach Lavine, I do think are the Lakers and I think Miami. Because both of those teams need a consistent go-to scorer. Again, Zach Lavine can be inconsistent at times, but he's still very dynamic. Both Miami and the Lakers could use his athleticism, his rim pressure, his three-point shooting, right? His ability to score at all three levels. I think that those are the two best destinations for Zach Lavine. And I do think the team pool in which that will be looking to trade for Zach is going to be very small, right? I definitely think the Lakers will be in the mix. Obviously, I think Miami very likely will be in the mix. Outside of that, I think, yes, the Sixers. I could see the Sixers being in the mix. There's reports that the Raptors are interested in Zach Lavine. One, I don't think Zach Lavine's going to be interested in the Raptors. And two, the Raptors are like that team that the Raptors are like that guy that brags about doing something crazy. Oh man, I've jumped off of 1,000,000 cliffs. Oh man, I jumped off of Mount Everest, right? And then you go to an 8-foot high cliff to go jump into the water, and he's just like, my back hurts today or whatever. He's just like, all right, dude, right? That probably was a terrible analogy, but still, you get the point, right? You look at a team like the Raptors, and it's just, they're all, they never jump in the water. They're always talking about how great of a swimmer they are, and yet they never want to get in the water to prove it. So I don't really buy the Raptors being a real threat. And then beyond that, it's again, would Sacramento really make that push? I don't think so. They're better off going off after a Pascal Siakam or an OG Anunoby or some perimeter guy rather than going and getting a guy that kind of just clashes with a De'Aaron Fox. So then after that, I think it boils down to the Lakers, right? Would the Thunder maybe make a push for him? I don't think so because, again, SGA, right? I think Miami has a very good and very realistic opportunity to land Zach Lavine. I think because of how high his salary is, I don't think he's going to cost the farm in order to trade him. Now, does Chicago have these dreams of, getting these Rudy Gobert type deals? And the reality is that that's not going to happen. And they just refuse to trade him, which they can, right? They could easily just say, no, we're not going to do it. I don't think Chicago should. I think that would be a terrible mistake by Chicago. Because I think, one, you're losing you're losing DeMar DeRozan in the offseason. I don't think DeMar's going to stay. Chicago isn't winning anything. You trying to trade Zach Lavine later isn't going to change anything, right? It's not all of a sudden more team. I just don't see anything changing. I don't think Chicago's going to get the deal that they want and expect to get for Zach Lavine. And I could see Chicago being stubborn enough to say, okay, fine, then we're not going to trade Zach, right? Does one of the teams like the Lakers or the Heat end up biting on that? Do one of the teams like the Lakers and the Heat say, okay, let's make that push? But I still kind of lean towards DeMar DeRozan for both the Lakers and the Heat. But I do think Miami, I do kind of think that Lavine makes more sense for Miami than the Lakers, right? I think Zach Lavine works great for the Lakers too, but I do think like Miami needs the athleticism from Zach Lavine more and the rim pressure and the things that he does more than the Lakers do, where like DeMar, I think for the Lakers makes more sense, right? I think Lavine makes more sense for Miami. But as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Those are mine. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Where do you think Zach Lavine ends up? Do you like him on the Heat? Do you like him elsewhere? Again, kind of just going through the teams in which Zach Lavine said he wants to go to and giving my thoughts and opinions on sort of a breakdown here. But however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.